All right, so this is the first talk for 2024 that we're doing at the plant sales, and so I just want to let you guys know right off the bat that if you haven't ever been here before or you don't know a lot about the ranch, we are a nonprofit that uses horses to help children who've experienced trauma. And so this plant sale and all of our plant sales are fundraisers for us to be able to keep the program running, along with other fundraisers that we do during the year. And then we also use our garden to teach our families how to grow their own food and how to do it economically and also sustainably. So we're organic and sustainable in all of the practices that we have in the garden. So I asked people, if you've been following us on social media, to send in questions. A lot of the things that I have on the list are questions that we had asked. But after I get through those questions, if you want to ask more questions, then they'll all get recorded, and then you don't have to take notes. You can just go on our YouTube channel and re-watch it if there's anything that you don't remember. So I want to touch first of all on the #1 mistakes that people make with tomato plants, that this comes up all the time. The first one is fertilizer. Your fertilizers for tomatoes always should have a low nitrogen count in them. We use these guys, and these are empty, so if anybody wants to take one to find them to buy. When you look at a fertilizer package that has on the back of it a bunch of numbers that are the analysis for that fertilizer, and the first 3 numbers are the ones that we care about the most. The first of those 3 is nitrogen. That number should be the lowest of those 3 numbers. So if you have a package that says 10-4-7, you don't want to use that on tomatoes. You'll get nice, big, beautiful plants and no fruit. So that first number has to be the lowest. This one in particular is 274. 2 is the lowest number. So and it's the first number, so that's the one that you use for these. The reason I like these guys is they're a little spike, so they release fertilizer slowly, and so you just put the spikes around the plant when you plant it, and then once, like August, depending on how fast your soil is draining, if you're in pots, you'd want to do it a little bit sooner because you're leaching those nutrients out of the pots faster. The second thing that people do is get their plants wet. One of the reasons that we can grow heirlooms without disease problems is because it's so dry here. So you don't want to have sprinklers hit your plants. You don't want to wet the plants down with your hose. Even if they're really dusty, you don't want to say, oh, well, they can't breathe, I'm just going to hit them with a hose. As soon as you raise humidity, you start disease problems. So we want to keep our plants big and open. Don't let them hang on the ground, keep them up above the ground. We suggest that you take all of your leaves off of the bottom that can touch the bottom, and then put like a straw mulch. We use a lot of straw across the top. Diseases, a lot of the fungal diseases and viruses live in the soil. So if we get a rainstorm early in the season and it splashes soil onto your plants, then the disease will just keep climbing up the plant. So keeping them dry and keeping the soil from splashing up on them will keep diseases from spreading. Sometimes you'll see, because we're a test garden, when we've got our plants going and we're taking all these notes about different things that we want to change, we also make notes of plants that have some susceptibility to certain diseases. And basically you're looking for things where the leaves are changing colors, where they're drying up. If the leaves are starting at the bottom changing colors, then you're looking at usually viruses and fungal problems, and you just trim those off as they move up the plant so they don't keep going further, and then just make sure you don't get the plants wet. One of the viruses that is really common is called tobacco mosaic virus, and it is spread by your hands and cigarette smoke. So if you are a smoker or you have a smoker in your family, 100% of 5,000 people tested that were smokers had mosaic virus on their hands. So you want to make sure you don't blow smoke onto your plants and that you wash your hands before you touch your plants. And if you get mosaic virus, it starts at the top and works down. So it's easier to tell that you're getting that disease because it's a more unusual one, and it makes the leaves all get mottled and weird and nasty. And then blossom drop. When plants are going through this time of year, you know, we get our plants in the ground and we're like, oh, they're so beautiful and the weather's perfect and they're growing like crazy, and they set all these flowers and it's 80 degrees and plants are happy, and then we get a 50-degree day and all of a sudden all of our blossoms fall off of our plants. We'll have the same thing happen later in the season when it gets up above 105, 110, where it gets too hot and the plants stress out, they drop all their blossoms. So how we help that in the early part of the season, a lot of that is just, it's going to be what the weather is like. If you lose your blossoms, you've got a whole season for them to set blossoms again and they'll come back. You can get a product called Blossom Set. I think they still sell it at Home Depot and Walmart. You spray it on the plants, and it's a hormone that helps the plants hold on to their blossoms if you have fluctuations. Usually for us in the early part of the season, we know we're going to get wacky weather. We're like, oh, we lost the blossoms, the next ones will come right back up, and they do. They just immediately start setting blossoms again. In the hot part of the summer, we know if we're getting in the triple digits and it's not getting below 70 degrees at night, that we're going to lose our blossoms. And for us, that's a big deal. If you've ever been to our tomato tasting, how many times we've had all the blossoms fall off in July, and then in August we have no tomatoes for the tomato tasting. So we have a system, and if you come to the tomato tasting, you'll be able to see it, where we run shade screen across the tops of the plants to lower the temperatures just a little bit. Ours is really rigged. It's not anything fancy. We use PVC pipe and twine and stuff to tie them up, and we use a 30% shade cloth. Usually the shade cloth you're using for to stay cool in your backyard is a 60, 70, 80%, and that blocks too much sun. So the 30% is a really good one to just lower those temps just enough to keep your plants from losing their blossoms. And then the other thing that we hear a lot from people is blossom end rot. If you've ever had blossom end rot, it's just the tomato looks beautiful on top, the bottom of it is rotten. And sometimes it'll be a soft, squishy, wet rotten, and sometimes it'll be a dry, scabby rotten. It is not a disease. It is a lack of calcium. And it doesn't mean that the calcium in your soil is low. Most of the time, calcium levels are fine. The problem is that calcium molecules are really big, and if you're fluctuating in your watering, where it's like you let them really dry out, the roots get smaller, then you water them, and when the roots puff back up again, they can't pick the calcium up and send it up to the plant, and so it shows up in blossom end rot. Now you can add calcium, it's not going to hurt anything, but most of the time your problem is going to be that your watering is not consistent enough, or it's not enough water that you're giving them for them to pick the calcium up and bring it up into the tomatoes. You'll also notice that all of the Roma varieties or canning varieties are more susceptible to blossom end rot than your slicing, eating cherry tomatoes are. And then with the watering, because you want to be consistent, and we get people all the time that ask us, so how much water should I give my plants? And it's like, that's like asking what kind of medicine you should take and asking me, and I don't know. So you have to take into consideration, like, we are on sandy soil. We go through a lot of water. We go through a lot of organic matter to keep the water there. We do the straw mulch to keep the water from getting evaporated. But if you don't know how much water you need to keep your plants consistent, spend a couple dollars on a moisture meter at Home Depot or Ace Hardware, and you just go out and stick that moisture meter in your soil, and it'll tell you. It even has red, yellow, green to let you know you want to be in the green. And if it's too dry, you're going to add more. If it's too wet, you're going to slow down so that you keep it in that green spot. And then when you know how much that is, like all of ours are on timers. So when we first got here, we were used to really nice, healthy soil. And we have this beach sand, and so I kept increasing the water, waiting to get in that green space. and it took a whole lot more than what we were used to. Then once we got it into the green space, we just set our timers to that, so it's doing it the same every year. As we get the soil healthier, we need less water, so then we start going back and not using quite as much. We are watering on drips, and any of you that have been watering on drips for many years and you're using compression fittings, those are where you take the tubes and you do this thing and then they break and they pull out, but you can never change them because they don't come back out again. That's super old school, get rid of them. The new systems are like these guys, where you unscrew them like this and pop them out. You can change things out. We move tubes around all the time, and then you pop them back in again and tighten it down like this. So you can change it a million times and it works just the same. We have on and off two things to stop them. If we've got something running through a bed and we don't want to take the drip out, but we want to turn the water off, like our garlic. Once we harvest our garlic, that bed, we're not going to take the drip out because something else is going to go in later. So we'll just leave it there. We just turn it off. And that way it's not getting water in that bed. And that'll also really help you with weeds and not losing nutrients if you're using your drips that way. And then the other thing is, if you're using the old school drip heads that you put in, then they get clogged, and now you don't have a drip head that works and there's no way to clear it. We use removable drip heads. They have a little screw on the top. You take them off. It has a little rubber thing inside. You rinse, get it to flush out, and then you screw it back on again, and it's as good as new. And if you want to see what those look like, all of our trees have them at the base of them. And so they're really easy to take on and off. And drips, honestly, once you go to drips, you usually don't want to go back to anything else. But if you're not using a drip, do a well around your plants if they're in the ground. Fill the well up by just holding the hose down at the soil, not up high so that it's splashing. Fill the well up and let the water go down, and then later check it with your moisture meter before you water it again. And if you're on a, we're fortunate in that we're on a well, but if you're in town and you've got meters on your water and you're having to pay for every drop, the less water you have to use, obviously, the better, so that you're conserving it. Any questions so far? Okay. The other mistake, the last mistake that people make is they're putting their plants too close together. And so for standard tomato plants, you need them 3 feet apart in every direction. For standard pepper plants, 2 feet apart in every direction to get like the best harvest that you can get. And with the micro tomatoes, if you got in there before they were all gone, we're just getting into lots of micros. Like we have an orange hat, it only gets this big. We have a golden hour that we tested last year that we have again this year that gets about this big, and we got about 35 pounds of tomatoes off of the golden hour. The person who developed golden hour, we have 2 new ones that we're testing this year from him. Same size, they're just a different color, different flavor profile. But if you're container gardening, it's like micro tomatoes they are blowing my mind, because they're not like a determinate tomato. If you have grown tomatoes for canning, where you have a tomato plant that only gets this high, so it's a whole bunch of tomatoes and then it's done. And it's supposed to be that way so you could pick them all at the same time and can them all at the same time. But then the plant is pretty much done for the year. I don't know how they're making this happen, but these micro tomatoes, you pick them, they set all new fruit, all new leaves, and they don't get any bigger, which is just bizarre to me. So so they're very different in the micro tomatoes and really great. We're going down that road pretty heavily. We started with the dwarf varieties and we still have some of those, but the dwarfs are this high. They're real big bulky plants and really heavy plants, so the micros are going to be the best for containers. The other thing, so these are questions people asked. Someone wanted me to explain trench planting, and we used to trench plant, but now that we do gopher cages, we can't. But trench planting is basically where you're planting your tomato plant on its side instead of straight up and down. And the reason you do that is because with tomatoes, every part of the main stem that makes contact with soil grows roots. So when you're laying them on your side, the more of that stem that is in the soil, the more roots it's going to set, and the faster you're going to get a crop. And so you'll see, like, it's really hard to do when your plant is that tall. You have to leave the top up above the soil, and you don't want to try to straighten it up, but you just dig a trench, you know, about this deep, however far that big that plant is. So if my plant's this tall, then I'm gonna, you know, dig a trench about this wide and about that deep, and I'm gonna take the plant out of the pot, lay it in the trench with just the top coming out the top, cover the rest of it with soil and pat it down, and then leave that plant. It's going to be sticking out like this. Leave it alone. Don't try to straighten it up, and in a couple of days it'll stand up on its own and reach for the sun. And then you can just put your trellises and cages and stuff over that. And the main reason for trench planting is just to get your plants to start faster. So the reason we don't trench plant anymore is because of these amazing things. So these are gopher cages, and these are gallon size. Each one of our tomato plants goes in one of these in the ground, so we bury it in the ground. They even make it where it's green at the top, so you know how far down to put it down. The green stays above the soil. You stick them in the ground, and then you plant your tomato in the cage, and you enjoy the fact that you're driving the gophers crazy because they can't get to your plant. So seriously, like, I'm just like, I hate gophers. So these, you can actually, the company is here in California. You can buy them at Morris Nursery, West Turf Nursery, or you can order them from the company, and you get them like in 2 days because they're so close. And they're really good about getting their orders out. And last time I ordered them, there's 2 in a package, and I think I paid $12 to $15 for 2 of them. So and they're galvanized. I've got some out there that are almost 20 years old, and they still haven't rusted. So they're much better than using chicken wire, and they last for a really long time. And then I actually have people on YouTube who've asked me to explain this on video, so that we can have it recorded. These are gopher hawks, the most amazing gopher trap in the world. But people buy them and they say, I tried it, it didn't work. And we had to figure out how to make them work here, because they are frustrating if you don't put them in correctly, and the gophers will just keep backfilling dirt in them. So I'm going to draw a picture of how you do it. So gophers will dig up, and this is for them to clear the dirt up, and that's where you get your mounds like this. Okay, like that. Sorry, Mr. Camera Guy. Down.
You can go closer to the camera.
Oh, closer to the camera. I'm like, what is that supposed to mean? Okay.
Show the video. There
this is where the gopher pushes the dirt up. This is his cross where he's going back and forth. Okay. So this is where he's digging to find his food, and when he has dirt that he needs to clear out of his mound or out of his tunnel, he's pushing it up here. Most people, when they're setting their gopher hawk, they find the tunnel in here with the probe in the clean out, and they think they're in the tunnel because it slides in really easy. So they think they're in the tunnel. That tunnel's already full of dirt. So it won't do any good to set the trap there, because as he's pushing out the next amount of dirt from his tunnel, he'll just push it up into your trap. Okay? So you have to find this guy right here. Okay? Where he's going back and forth, the open tunnel, to be able to get the gopher hawk in there. And the way you do that, at least the way I do that, is to follow the clean out. Where that mound is, I find where he was pushing it out. It's soft soil. Okay, so I'm going to set this down for a second. Here's your probe. So you take this out and you find which direction in that hole that it's soft. And then you start following it, and I will dig it out with my hand, pull it up, find it again, dig it out with my hand until I finally come to the tunnel that has no dirt in it. And then that's where I put the gopher hawk. So once I know I've got a cross tunnel going this way, so it's this part right here, I'm gonna put the trap in that hole, okay? So then you're supposed to make a little hole with the probe. Then you stick this guy in there, move it around so that it makes it the same size as your trap, okay? Then you stick your trap in there and you pull up, not down. Even says it on the trap, don't push down because you'll ruin the trap. So when it's down in the ground, you can't push this way, you've got to pull that way, and it locks it in place like this. And then the gopher goes into here, pushes that little thing in the middle, and it snaps it like that and catches them. What I've discovered one of the things that I've discovered from using these is that if I completely clean the tunnel out and there's no dirt in it, they feel the trap, they immediately start pushing dirt into it. So I leave just a little bit of dirt on each side of the tunnel so that they have to, rather than go looking for dirt and finding the trap, they start pushing the dirt I left in there, and that's enough to get them caught in it. The other thing is I have 6 of these, and I usually put 2 of them in one tunnel, and if 2 of them doesn't catch them, I go get all 6 of them. And I figure I will eventually wear this guy down, he'll let his guard down, and he will get caught. And I've never failed to catch these guys. And some of them are really smart, but I'm smarter. At least when it comes to gophers, I'm smarter. So these guys, like, it's funny because when you get good at this, it becomes personal. And I just had one the other day that twice he backfilled my traps, and he was clearing all the dirt out from underneath one of our trees out at the arena. And so I got down under the tree, found all these stuck, I think I put 4 of them out there, and they were within a foot of each other. And 45 minutes later, I drove by when I was cleaning, and I was like, oh, one of the traps is snapped. And you can tell they've set them off because there's yellow right here. So when the trap is set, you can't see the yellow, and when it pops up, you can see the yellow. So if you go up to it and you pull lightly and it doesn't come up easily, that means you've got a gopher on the end of it. Hopefully you're not squeamish at this point, because there have been times where all it caught was their leg. So you bring a shovel with you, and you got to get brutal. They didn't care about your plants. So you dig it up with a shovel, pull it out, set it on the ground, and whack them with the shovel to kill them. And then you just lightly open it, shake them. We have a lot of raptors out here, and we have kit foxes. So we never use poison for anything because it will kill them. But we are like on every predator's map for good eating without having to work. And so they come through here, and a gopher never is there the next day. We just throw them out where they can get to them, and if it's not a raptor that's getting them, it's a kit fox or somebody's dog or the neighborhood cat. We were setting cameras because someone said they saw coyotes on our property. So we were setting game cameras and taking a gopher that we caught, tied its leg to a string. PETA's gonna love me. And putting a spike in the ground so that they had to work to get it away and put it right in front of the camera. No joke, 30 minutes after we set that thing up, the fattest cat I have ever seen in my life came over and grabbed that gopher and ran off with it. I was like, the kit foxes are really not going to be happy. So if you live in an area where you have critters that can come through and eat your gophers that you catch, throw them out there for them. Otherwise, just, throw them in the trash on the day that the trash man is coming so it doesn't stink your trash can up. Any questions about the gopher hawk? Okay, just for our YouTube questioners. Okay, frost fabric. We have frost fabric for sale up there. This is really the only time of year you need it. We're gonna, like right now it's beautiful. Next week it's in the low 60s with it going down into the 40s at night. And our greenhouse heaters are set at 50, so they drop into the high 40s at night. So the plants are still a little tender this time of year. So wrapping a piece of frost fabric around your plants rather than plastic, because plastic, as soon as the sun comes out, your plant, it's like 150 degrees wrapped around there, fries your plants. The frost fabric allows the air to blow through. It'll also help with germination once you've got flowers blooming, that you're not completely blocking the wind, because the wind is what causes them to set fruit. And then also, because we're going into windy season, a lot of times your plants, you put them out when they're little and the wind just beats the snot out of them. The frost fabric will keep the plants from getting beat up. And then the best part is we can still get hailstorms for the next month and a half. If you get a hailstorm, it's just gonna shred your plants. You can put frost fabric over the top and it'll keep the hail from shredding your plants up. The hail got my cucumbers last year. I didn't have frost fabric on, it just killed all the cucumbers. And then tomatillos. Someone was asking, I buy tomatillos every year and they don't produce. If you are buying one tomatillo, you need at least two.
Are you gonna have it?
Yeah, they'll be in April. Yeah, they're a later thing that comes up. But they don't have to be the same variety. If you're gonna save seeds, you want them to be the same variety, but they just need to pollinate off of each other. So if you have two or more, then they do great, but if you only have one, they won't produce. You'll have nice, big, beautiful plants, you just won't have any tomatillos. And then we have, if you've been to the tomato tasting, we talk about this at length, and but someone wanted me to explain vermicomposting is worms. That's why we have the little worm containers up there, and we have a vermicompost pile over here. Worms are like the most amazing thing in the world. Like, they work better than anything else for breaking down organic matter. So these are red worms. They are not night crawlers or earthworms, and there's nothing wrong with night crawlers or earthworms. They just don't reproduce fast enough to break your organic matter down. The red worms reproduce crazy. As long as they have moisture and they have stuff to eat, they will keep reproducing. So when we go to our vermicompost pile and I stick a pitchfork in there and turn it over, it looks like spaghetti. And everything just gets thrown on top, and they come up to the surface and grab the stuff and pull it down and turn it into worm castings, which is the best fertilizer in the world for your gardens. So you look at those little tubs and you go, what am I supposed to do with this little tub of worms? Either get a container, like a plastic container with a lid on it, drill a couple holes in the top, put some soil in the bottom, and start throwing your kitchen scraps in there, and just keep it moist. Put your worms in there and they'll start eating it, and you just have to keep adding food if you need something small. Or if you've got room outside, make a pile, wet it down, and start throwing your kitchen scraps, garden scraps, manure from your rabbits, your horses, your chickens, just not dogs or cats. Putting that on top of there, and they'll break all of that stuff down really fast, and they'll also reproduce really fast. So you can take your excess worms as you're going through and you're pulling your castings out. Make sure you save a little handful of them to throw back in the pile. The rest of them can go out in your garden beds and your pots to help keep making food out there. One of the things that people keep talking to us about, I think somebody did a YouTube thing on it, is where you take a bucket, and if you have a raised garden bed, you sink the bucket in halfway, there's holes drilled all around it, and you throw your kitchen scraps in the bucket, and the worms go out into your beds and then they come in to grab food, and then they go back out again. And so you just pull the top off your bucket. You can see if you need to add some more, and you keep putting it in there. So they're actually spreading your worm castings for you out into your raised beds. Questions on worms? Yeah.
Can you get too many? Like if you have just a contained planter bed and you put worms in there and they're so prolific, then
If they get to be where they don't have enough to eat for how many there are, they'll stop reproducing. They'll stay there and they'll be, healthy as long as there's enough food to maintain that number. But if like you decided to stop feeding it altogether, they'll try to go down into the dirt. But otherwise they'll just start dying off eventually because they're not reproducing after themselves. Usually you can find a place to put them. If you're living in an apartment and all you have is like pots, ask a garden group, does anybody want some red worms? And you could pass them on to them, and they'll just keep reproducing, or you could just let them stay the size that the amount that you've got. If that's all you're ever going to need them for, you just feed enough to do that many. So yeah. I think that's it. Any other questions that I did not cover? Yeah.
How much sun? I mean, you just plant them in the sun.
Yes. So tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants need at least 6 hours of sun a day. If it's less than that, you'll get leggy plants and they won't produce as much. And then, like I said, in the summer, ours are under shade screen, but they're still getting 70% sunlight. But yes, they need to have at least 6 hours, and more. The more, the better. The more they'll set fruit if they're getting more sun. Yeah.
Do you have any micro tomato seeds? I have a hydroponic in the house. I like to put them in.
She asked if we have any hydroponic seeds. I will, until we get done with growing plants this year. I won't know if I have enough seeds to sell. And then
Just the micro.
yeah, and then once we get at the tomato tasting, we have seeds for sale. Those are the ones that we're harvesting that are growing in the garden during the summer. So then we're letting seeds go out. But most of the time we're not saving enough seeds to sell them during growing season, just because we don't want to run out of seeds. And we have already, if you haven't heard, we've run out of San Marzano. So we just don't sell seeds this time of year.
Okay. Now,
Yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
Can we transplant the plants that we bought today into like a big 5-gallon container just for the time being until like after the frost?
Yes, so she's asking if you can up pot to a bigger container the plants you're buying today, and yes, it's a good idea to put them in a larger container until it's safe to put them outside, unless you're going to really wrap them. To wait until we get past this. Last year we got frost in May, and that was crazy, and we were like running out here running frost fabric across everything to protect the stuff that was already in the ground. That's unusual, obviously, for us to get frost in May, but it does happen, and we most likely will still have a couple of frosts, or we'll at least get into the high 30s. And so yeah, if you can put them in a bigger container and put them out in the sun during the day and then bring them in at night until we've got safe. If you're looking at the 15-day forecast and everything at night is in the high 40s for your low, you don't even need to bring them in. Just leave them out there. Yeah, because like I said, we're set at 50 in our greenhouses, and you need 3 or 4 days of hardening off. That's where you're taking a plant from a protected environment like our greenhouse and putting it outside. And this time of year, if you take them from that protection and you stick them outside and that fluctuation is too great, then the plants will shock from that. So our set it's set at 50, so it drops down to like 47, 48 before the heaters kick in. So if it's going to get lower than 47 or 48 right now, you need to bring your plants in at night or have protection around them. And then once they have been out in the the 48, 49, 50, they've been hardened off, and then they'll be fine as long as it stays in that realm. And then we're just going to keep obviously climbing. It's only going to get hotter, unfortunately. So, yeah. Okay. Other questions? All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
And the guy who turns off the camera is not here. There he is. Oh, we're done.
Okay.
Thanks for coming.